Hi guys, it's Teacher Jess. I am recording this week's math lesson ahead of time rather than live streaming it because I have been having some issues with the live streaming this week. Hopefully that will be ironed out by next week and you guys can go ahead and view it live on Thursday at starting at 9 o'clock. And then to be followed with a Google Hangout from 10 to 11 if you have follow-up questions or if you would like help working on the practice pages. So that being said, you guys have 3 lessons left in your math, which is very exciting. That means that you only have the remaining 3 lessons, and then I will be assigning a performance task to end this last unit that you guys are working on, and then that's it. So at that point, since we have about 10 weeks left of school, I will then be using that time for you guys. I will find some lessons to put together on stuff to prepare you guys for middle school, hopefully. I know that middle school has a range of math classes, so unlike at the elementary level where you have the same teacher and and they teach everything, you will be going from class to class learning different things. So it may be that you guys will end up signing up for different levels of math, but I would like to do what I can to best prepare you guys for what to expect with that. That being said, I would also like to use that time as review. So any of the previous lessons that you found confusing or you have questions about or you feel like you don't really have solid mastery of, this will be a great time to go back and review those if you would like. So let's go ahead and jump in. So we are going to be working, again, this is the last unit of your math. Congratulations, you guys are almost there. We're going to be talking about geometry and we're going to be starting with the coordinate plane. So we talked, I think, a little bit about this before spring break, in that you have on coordinate plane, you have intersecting lines, you have the x-axis which goes side to side, and you have the y-axis that goes up and down. You may be more familiar with it if you have seen it just this part of it, in that you have your x coordinate just part of it and your y coordinate just part of it, and you may have seen things like if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, your scale up to the side, and then maybe you have something like a bar graph that goes up to different amounts along that path. So that might be something that you're familiar with already, but really the coordinate plane is just a grid. So if you have any grid paper at home, that might be a useful resource. But we're going to just go ahead and jump into the lesson. And so what I would like is for you to please follow along in your, at this point you should have both your instruction books and your practice books. So your instruction book is the one that you guys put all your stickers on, and we are going to be starting with that one. I'd like you guys to work through that book as I go through the lesson, and then I will be assigning you some practice pages from your practice book. Now the practice pages, I had my assistant pull some of the pages from your practice books before the break in anticipation that we would be meeting in person. So you may have some loose sheets of paper in there, so you might want to look there first to see if those papers are included there before looking in your practice books, because they may not be there because I already pulled them because I was trying to be prepared. Okay, so we are going to be starting on page 284 in your instruction book. So go ahead and turn to page 284 and we will get going. So at the very top of the page, it has the question, what is the coordinate plane? So that seems like a great place to start. It says, in the past you have used a number line to represent a single quantity. A number line can be both vertical or horizontal. Typically, we have used horizontal number lines, but they can go vertically. We talked, I think, a little bit about how on your number line, if you have lines at the end of it, it means that that is a set ending and beginning place on your number line. Understanding that your number line truly can go on infinitely, meaning that if you could just keep counting, right? So you could keep counting, and so if you started at 0, you would keep counting, and you could continue on forever and ever and ever. So if you see an arrow, it means that you can continue on infinitely in that direction. Now, typically we think of 0 as the starting place for all numbers, but truly we can actually go the opposite way as well. So 0 can really be just the midline point, and we can go the opposite way as well. If we had numbers on the opposite side of 0, we would be dealing with negative numbers. So we're not going to be worrying too much about negative numbers yet, but that would be something that you could anticipate seeing in the future on coordinate planes. They have in your book a nice example of a vertical number line, a horizontal number line, and then there's the coordinate plane. So a plane is a two-dimensional face. So remember we talked about how three-dimensional shapes have faces. If you have a two-dimensional shape, it's actually called a plane. And so a coordinate plane just means that you have your plane divided into number lines on both sides so that you can find, it would create kind of like a grid, not kind of like a grid, it would create a grid that you would then end up finding coordinates on. So for example, if you wanted to say 1 on the y-axis and 1 on the x-axis, you would find where those two would meet on the coordinate plane. My pen is dying. Time to grab a new one. Underneath that first image, it says, think, how do we distinguish between the two number lines? So as I mentioned earlier, you have an x-axis and you have a y-axis. So your x-axis is always going to be your horizontal axis, and your y-axis is always going to be your vertical axis. So x goes side to side, y goes up and down. Underneath it says a coordinate plane is made up of two perpendicular lines. Perpendicular means that they intersect like this and they form right angles where they intersect. The number lines meet at the zeros. So that point is labeled with the letter O for origin. So for example, on my coordinate plane here, my intersecting point would be right here. So that would be my O, or origin point, and that would also be equivalent to 0 if we were using these as a number line, which we will be. So you can see in the picture that you have your coordinate plane is divided up with your x-axis, your y-axis, then you have it numbered off, and that creates the grid on your coordinate plane. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the other side of the page. It says, how can you locate points on the coordinate plane? A point is just a dot. So for example, like I said, if I were to look for the 1 and 1 on my coordinate plane, if I would look for the first one and the first one on my x-axis and first one on my y-axis, and I would kind of trace them up to see where they would meet. My point would be where I would put my dot, the meeting point of both. Now, what I just did is I said that I had 1 on the y-axis and 1 on the x-axis. That is called an ordered pair. So, and you'll see that below that yellow box on page 285. it says an ordered pair is a pair of numbers that describes the location of a point in the coordinate plane. The first number is called the x-coordinate. So on your x-axis, this is always going to be the first number. And the second number is called the y-coordinate. So you would always have an ordered pair that would go in the same order. You would see it as parentheses x, comma, y, and parentheses. So these would be your two numbers, but you would have your number on the x-coordinate and followed by your number on the y-coordinate separated by a comma. The x-coordinate tells the distance from the origin along the x-axis. So your x number would go along the number line of your x-axis. Your y-coordinate goes along the vertical y-coordinate. So no matter what your number, so if I were to write the ordered pair for 1 on my x-axis and 1 on my y-axis, I would write it as 1, comma, 1. If I were to change that, and instead of it being a 1 on the x-axis, or on the y-axis rather, let's say I wanted it to be a 2 on the y-axis, but still remaining a 1 on the x-axis, it would be 1, comma, 2. Okay, the x-coordinate tells the distance from the origin along the x-axis. Oh yeah, we already talked about that. Okay, the origin is the point where the x-axis and the y-axis meet. Since the origin is 0 units along the x-axis and 0 units along the y-axis, the location is 0, comma, 0. So the ordered pair of your origin would be 0, comma, 0. 0 along the x-axis and 0 along the y-axis. They have a handy little glossary table here for you, right along here. And then it has the term and the definition. So the term coordinate plane has the definition of a space formed by two perpendicular number lines called axes. So that's just a fancy way of saying you have two lines that intersect, that cross each other at right angles. And those are called axes. And the space that's created with that little right angle part of your axes is called the coordinate plane. Your x-axis is a horizontal number line in the coordinate plane, so the one that goes side to side and has numbers on it. The y-axis is your vertical number line in the coordinate plane, the one that goes up and down and has numbers on it. Origin is the point 0, comma, 0, where the x-axis and y-axis intersect. So if I were to have my perpendicular lines, that little L that's created is where they both meet. That is the origin point, or 0, comma, 0. Ordered pair is a pair of numbers that describes the location of a point in the coordinate plane. An x-coordinate is the first number in an ordered pair, and the y-coordinate is the second number in an ordered pair. It always goes in the same order to avoid confusion, because if you were to just decide whatever, that would get very confusing in math. So you always want to follow the same. The first number is on the x-axis, the second number is on the y-axis. Okay, the first question says, think about how, so we're on number 1 at the bottom of 285. It says, think about how you have heard the word origin used outside of math. Why do you think the point 0, comma, 0 is called the origin? So I'm not going to go ahead and work through that. I'm going to have you guys go ahead and fill that in. You can come back to it and fill it in, because I'm not going to leave space right now for you to write in your answer, but I would recommend coming back and just thinking about, what does origin mean? What does that mean to you outside of math, and why do you think that that's being used on the coordinate plane? Okay, turning the page, we're now on page 286. It says, let's explore the idea. Ordered pairs represent the location of points on the coordinate plane. The ordered pair for the origin is 0, comma, 0. Now, you'll notice that they have given you a coordinate plane with different ordered pairs presented as points. So point A is at the 1 along the x-axis, but it doesn't go up any. It's just along the x-axis. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as we work through the problem. So number 2 says locate point D in the coordinate plane above. Start at the origin. How many units do you move along the x-axis to be lined up under the point D? So if I were to use, I'm actually going to do it a different way. Okay, so I have made my coordinate plane. I have my origin point, or 0, 0 right here because it's 0. It would be correspond to 0 on the x-axis, my horizontal axis, and 0 on my y-axis, my vertical axis. I have then it written as a number line 1 through 4. My arrows indicate that I could continue going indefinitely on the y-axis, and I could also continue going indefinitely on the x-axis, but I have chosen to stop writing at 4. I also have my axes labeled as x and y. So they have a point D represented on your coordinate plane. So the first one says locate point D on your coordinate plane, so in your book. Start at the origin, and how many units do you move along the x-axis to be lined up under point D? So if I start at the origin point, I go 1, 2. If I were to draw a line up, 2 would be the coordinating x point along the x-axis for point D. So if I were going to start writing it as my ordered pair, 2 would be the number that's along the x-axis. Okay, 3 says the second number in an ordered pair is the y-coordinate. So we're going to start at the origin again, and this time we're going to travel along the y-axis until we find which one it corresponds to on, that's a funny looking 3. Along the y-axis. So if I were to go up 1, 2, 3, I would see that 3, if I draw a line over from the 3, 3 would correspond on my y-axis to point D. So my ordered pair would be 2, 3 for point D. So 4 says locate point A. Oh, I'm sorry. So you have a couple of places to fill that in. And then there's a little box to the right that says ordered pair for point D. It says x, y. And so our ordered pair would be 2, 3. 2 on the x-axis, 3 on the y-axis for point D. Now it's saying locate point A in the coordinate plane above. Start at the origin. How many units do you move along the x-axis to be on point A? So point A is right here. So if we start at the origin and we move along our x-axis, the first one we get to is A. So if I were going to write my ordered pair, remember I'm always starting with my x-axis, so it's a 1 on the x-axis. Now, if you continue on, if I start at the origin again and I move along the y-axis, I don't go anywhere. I can't, 1 is the first one that I come to, but A is not in the coordinate plane. It is still on the number line of 1. So it would correspond to that point of 0, that origin point for the y-axis. So my ordered pair for A would be 1, 0. Okay. So continuing through that, it says the ordered pair for point A would be 1, 0 is what you would write in. Okay, 5 says locate point B on the coordinate plane above. Identify the ordered pair for point B. Okay, so if I'm looking at B, B is over here on the y-axis, the first one up. So if I were to go, so remember my ordered pair always starts with my x-axis. I'm not going over any on my x-axis. My x-coordinate would be 0 because I haven't gone over any. It's along my origin point. But I am going up one mark on the y-axis. Therefore, for the y coordinate, I would have 1. So our our ordered pair for point B would be 0, 1. Number 6 says locate point C on the coordinate plane above. Identify the ordered pair for point C. For C, we're going over 1 from X, and we're going up 1 from Y to intersect at C. So our ordered pair would be 1, 1. Number 7 says, how did you determine the coordinates for point C and D? So again, I'm not going to go ahead and answer that question, but they're asking, how did you come up with the ordered pairs for C and D? So something that you might end up writing is you went over to see how many spaces over on the x-axis, then you went up to see how many spaces up on the y-axis, and then you wrote them as x, y for your ordered pair. All right, moving along to the second page. It says so we're on page 287. Let's talk about it. Use the coordinate plane from the previous page. Now you will describe the points as movements from the origin. So number 8 says place your finger on the origin, so at that point 0 again. Move right and then move up to point D. Use words to describe how far to the right and how far up point D is from 0, 0, your origin point. So if you were to trace it with your finger, you would start at 0, you would go over 2 on the x-axis, you would go up 3 on the y-axis, and that would be your point D. The follow-up part of that question says, how is the location of point D related to the ordered pair 2, 3? Well, 2 corresponds to the amount of distance that you travel along the x-axis. 3 corresponds to the amount of distance you travel on the y-axis, and so that would be the way of telling you how to get to point D on the coordinate plane. 9 says start at the origin point, move to point A. How is your move related to the ordered pair 1, 0? Well, if you move over 1 on the x-axis and you do not move up any on the y-axis, you are going to get to point A. The ordered pair is telling you how the location of point A. 10 says describe how you would move from the origin point from the origin to point 0, 1. Move right blank units and move blank units. So if the first number is 0, that's along the x-axis. So you would move 0 units to the right. Then you are going to be moving up 1 unit. What letter represents this point on the coordinate plane? If you look back, you'll notice that that corresponds with point B on your coordinate plane. And then 11 says the ordered pair 1, 1 tells you to start at the origin and move right 1 unit and up 1 unit. What letter names this point on the coordinate plane? If you follow along on your other page, you'll notice that it corresponds with point C. Number 12 says plot a point at 3, 2 on the coordinate plane. Label this point E. So on that coordinate plane on the previous page, go ahead and go over 3 on the x-axis, up 2 on the y-axis, and put a dot and mark it with an E for point E. Underneath it says try it another way. Work with your group to show the coordinates for each point on the coordinate plane. So we don't have a group clearly because you guys are working from home, but we're going to go ahead and try to write up the coordinates in the following table. So 13 says complete the table for each point on the coordinate plane. So for example, point A has the ordered pair 1, 0. So you'll notice in the table that they have, here's A, and it has 1 for X and 0 for y. So we're going to go ahead and go over and fill in the remaining numbers. So b, if you were to go over to b, you would see that you go over 0. You are staying along just the y-axis, and you go up 1. So for x, you would write in 0. For y, you would write in 1. For c, you would go over 1 and up 1. So you would have 1 for x and 1 for y. For d, you go over 2 and up 3. So you would have 2 for x and 3 for y. And then they have it written in already for you for points E and F, which are not already on your coordinate plane. You just wrote in E, which should be 3 over on the x coordinate and y, or I'm sorry, on the x axis, and 2 up on the y axis. And then they're telling you that F is a point corresponding to 4 over on the x-axis and 0 up on the y-axis. So go ahead and mark in point F, 4 over on the x-axis, 0 up on the y-axis, which is 14. 14 says the table gives the location to point F, plot and label point F in the coordinate plane. And that completes our lesson. That is actually the shortest lesson that I have done so far in a video tutorial. I hope that this made some of the information in your book fairly clear. I'm going to go ahead and assign some practice pages for you to work on. I will be available. I will be posting this video as soon as I finish it. It will be available for you to view. Right now it is almost 9 o'clock on Wednesday night. It will be available for you if you don't want to watch it right now. It will be available for you to watch tomorrow morning. You could watch it at the 9 o'clock hour that we would normally be doing a YouTube live session, except that I'm ironing out those technical difficulties, and then following it with the Google Hangout office hours going from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So so go ahead and work through your lesson, and then hopefully if you have any questions, I will see you at the Google Hangout. All right. Thanks, guys. Stay tuned for next week. Fingers crossed. Hopefully I can get YouTube to like me a little bit better and not restrict my videos, so that you can see me live in action on next Thursday. All right. Bye for now.